Hello networkers, and welcome back to another episode for Ask the Network Engineer, where I will answer one of your questions. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe and check that notification to get updated on latest videos on this channel. In this episode, I want to talk about replacing Cisco hardware with another vendor in the data center. Yikes. Well, this was a question that was posted by Sheldon Moss, and he said that he has a very quick, simple question. As a consultant, have you ever been part of swapping a Cisco core switch at a data center with Dell equipment? Okay, let's talk about that. So the short answer is no. I have never been part of projects where I have replaced a Cisco core switch with another vendor. Now that's very typical because if people call me, it's because they want to put Cisco equipment in. And typically is to replace other vendor equipment with Cisco. So I've gone in and replaced core switches that was with Netgear, yikes, and with Extreme Networks. So there are a lot of particular projects that I worked on, and it was replacing those gears with Cisco equipment, never the opposite. However, I have replaced Cisco hardware with other vendors in other type of topologies or solutions. So for example, for an internet solution, I typically am replacing Cisco routers and Cisco ASA firewalls with the FortiGate firewalls or with the Palo Alto Network next generation firewall appliances. And the big reason for that is, besides the enhanced security of a unified box, is because the handoff from the ISP is Ethernet. Now, a long time ago, long time ago, when we wanted like very fast speeds, then we had like ATM connections, OC3, things like that, fiber. And those ports were only available on routers. So that would be terminated to the router. And then there's the firewall. And the firewall took care of all the security responsibilities, like, security policies and VPN tunnels. But now in today's market, we have gigabit or 10 gig Ethernet handoffs that we can plug directly into our equipment, which means I can get rid of that router and just use my firewall instead. And that's why typically that's what environments are doing now. Now, when it comes to the LAN, a campus where it's usually a user-centric environment with user computers, laptops, printers, wireless, things like that, that depends on the size of the business. I kind of still keep at Cisco, but it depends on the size of the business. So for example, for small and SMB size companies, there's the Cisco small business switches, but I really don't like those switches at all. I really don't like them. So for those, I typically are putting in HP switches in there. That's something I'm starting to do a lot more of. Some, I still have the small business switches, but they're really not like the other equipment out there. Now, if you are a medium, larger size company, yes, the Cisco Catalyst switches are definitely the way to go. I prefer those. They're really quality stuff. They're more expensive, and that's why I typically recommend that for the medium and large size companies. But replacing Cisco switches with something else, that is not something that I typically do for those kind of clients. Now, with a data center, which is kind of what you were kind of really talking about, I still go the Cisco route. So for the larger data center environments, because for smaller data centers, yeah, Cisco Catalyst switch and we're good to go. Okay, but for larger ones, I do recommend the Cisco Nexus switches, right? There's different type of models that we can definitely choose from because their requirements are typically 10 gig, 40 or 100 gig support. So those switches are fantastic for that. Cisco is great at routing and switching. That's why I typically always prefer that over everything else, because I have that experience. I've seen the quality of that. Now, for data centers that are more like a data center clause topology with a spine and a leaf layer, that's set up a little bit different. That's for more like SDN. It can also be for VXLANs. That's also a very common thing. I typically do the Cisco Nexus 9000 series for that. And that's assuming that the SDN solution is a Cisco ACI product. Okay, there are certain companies that really want a Cisco-centric environment. No problem. There it is. So I typically do that, but that's only for some customers. But there are some that want more of an open source solution. And for those, I do set up HP switches using OpenFlow for the SDN. And that was, again, the motivating factor for that video series on our channel. Now for the WAN itself, ooh, wow, WANs are changing. You know, like WANs used to be like private WAN clouds and MPLS, and a lot of my clients are moving away from a private WAN and going towards a public WAN, as I call it, which basically consists of VPN tunnels being established. The internet is becoming a lot more reliable, faster, so people can utilize their internet connection for their private connection by just using tunnels between their sites. So I'm seeing a move towards that. And you look at like SD-WAN, that's what they're kind of doing. They're kind of leveraging maybe multiple internet connections or private WAN and choosing the best path based on performance. So I see the trend. So for a WAN, for the equipment itself, it depends on the handoff or really the bandwidth requirements. So like if it's really, really fast requirements, like we need to have an ATM connection, you know, beyond what gigabit can actually support. So then that one, I would have to use a Cisco router. And that one, my favorite is the Cisco ASR 1000 series. Those are my favorite. Those are beast, but those are really for large environments, not even medium. Those are for larger environments. But for some of these private WAN connections, we typically just plug that directly into the core switch. And that's basically it, which means we don't really need a router. So that's something else too. So again, I'm seeing a very wary future for WANs because of SD-WAN in that direction. So here are my final points or considerations for replacing something that you really know very well with something else. Now, I don't have experience with Dell equipment, so I really can't comment on that. But regardless of that, there are 4 things that you need to keep in mind if you're going to replace something with a product that is kind of in unfamiliar territory. And it's a very simple thing. So the 4 things is basically, first, you need to be knowledgeable with the product that will be deployed. So if it's an HP switch, for example, you need to have that, or in this case, a Dell switch, for your example, you need to be knowledgeable with that switch, how to configure it, how to support it, things like that. That is really, really important. Second, you want to pick the right hardware that will replace that. And the best thing to do is to mirror what you're replacing, look at its performance aspects, its features, its capabilities, and get a hardware that is equivalent to that. That's kind of like a best place to start. The third thing is you want to actually start small. So if you want to put in Dell equipment or HP equipment or anything like that, don't do it for the core. Put it for one of the access switches. Keep it simple, keep it tiny though, because you get to deploy that, get really familiar with that product, and then over time, you can start moving up to the bigger component, like the core switch. So that's a really big thing that I typically do. Because again, I talked about that HP is something that I'm really looking at, but I typically do Cisco deployments. So no problem. We start rolling out these HP switches for smaller sites, right? We deploy them for access switches or for the access in the data center. Keep it very simple. And then we start moving up to do something big. This here is basically, it is building your experience on that product. And the 4th thing, which is really important, is anything that you're replacing, make sure you have a support contract for that product so that if there are issues, if there's problems, you get to pick up the phone, call that technical support team, and get assistance for support configuration or whatever that is needed. And we are done with this episode. So thank you for watching this video. If you found this video helpful and like to support this channel further, you can do that by going to my new Patreon page listed right there. And until next time, keep networking.